Why was she always the one left behind? The question clung to her chest like a weight as the first light of dawn brushed the jagged Colorado peaks with gold. Alexis Morgan sat at the edge of Lake Morrison, her boots dangling just above the mirrored water. Steam curled from her coffee cup, rising and dissolving into the cold morning air. She welcomed the sting of the breeze on her face. Pain, cold, even exhaustion. These were anchors, reminders that she was still here, even when a part of her wished she was. She slipped a small piece of metal from her jacket pocket, letting the light catch on it. A worn dog tag, edges smoothed by years of restless fingers. The name etched into it was Nathan Cole, her captain, her friend, her unfinished chapter. "Was it worth it, Nate?" she whispered. "Was my life worth yours?" The lake gave no answer, only the soft rhythm of waves tapping against the pylons beneath her feet. She traced the letters with her thumb. A ritual, a penance. 5 years since Coringal Valley. 5 years since the firefight that ended her team and left her alive to carry ghosts. She threw a stone across the surface, watched it skip 4 times before sinking. Some mornings she thought she should have gone down with them. Other mornings, she was just tired. Tired of carrying memories that clawed their way back each night, of building walls so no one would see the soldier behind the bartender's face. Her phone buzzed sharp against the quiet. A text from Edwin, "Need you in early. Problem with delivery." With a sigh, she slipped the tag back into her pocket. The mountains glowed brighter behind her, as constant as her guilt. She rose, dusting off her jeans, and walked to her truck. Time to put the mask back on. Whiskey River sat at the edge of Granite Falls, wood-paneled and stubbornly alive through a century of reinvention. It smelled of oak, whiskey, and memory. Alexis had worked here 4 years, pouring drinks for locals, trading small talk without ever giving pieces of herself away. She found Edwin in the storage room, frowning over a clipboard. At 65, his back curved, but his eyes were sharp and loyal. He looked up, relief softening the lines on his face. "Sorry to call you in." "No problem," Alexis said, setting down her bag. She nodded toward the clipboard. "Delivery issues." He sighed. "Distributor cut our order in half, said there's a shortage of bourbon, but that's not the real problem." His hand raked through thinning white hair. "I had visitors this morning, 3 of those Iron Wolves bikers." At the name, Alexis's posture shifted without thought. Her body tightened the way it always did before a fight. They offered community protection services, $2,000 a month. Protection from what? Alexis asked, though she knew the answer. "From them, I'd expect." Edwin set the clipboard aside. He tried to sound defiant, but the crease between his brows betrayed him. "Told them to get lost. Might not have been smart, but I'm too old to bow to bullies." Alexis studied him for a long moment. He'd hired her without questions, given her space to exist when she was still drowning. He had earned more loyalty than most of the officers she'd served under. "What did they say?" "They'll be back." She forced a smile, though her thoughts were already racing. Escape routes, points of cover, what weapons were at hand. "I'll handle the calls, you get some rest." Edwin gave her a knowing look, but let it go. When he left, Alexis stayed behind in the quiet storage room, rolling her shoulders, pushing away the tension coiled in her chest. She had chosen Granite Falls for its silence, its distance from everything she wanted to forget. But silence was fragile. It shattered too easily. By evening, Whiskey River hummed with life. Country music played low from the jukebox, chatter rippled across the bar, glasses clinked. Alexis moved smoothly among them, refilling drinks, cracking small jokes, scanning each face. Always scanning, always cataloging. The soldier never left, even when she wore the bartender's smile. At 6:17 p.m. the door opened and the hum faltered. 3 men walked in, their black leather vests stitched with a wolf's head insignia. The Iron Wolves. The lead, Carter, looked exactly as Edwin had described, tall, heavyset, beard down his chest, arrogance hanging on him like armor. The two younger ones flanked him, sharp-eyed and twitchy, like dogs eager to bite. They crossed the room slowly, letting everyone absorb their presence. Conversation thinned, tension thickened. Alexis continued drying a glass, every muscle in her body alert but controlled. The bat beneath the bar was 3 feet away. The exits were clear. She counted the patrons who might be caught in crossfire if things went wrong. "What can I get you?" she asked evenly. 3 beers, Carter said, slapping a 20 on the bar, and a conversation with the old man. "He's not here," a lie delivered without a blink. Carter leaned in, his massive forearms resting on the oak counter. Funny, his truck still outside. "He's not available." Carter's hand shot forward, clamping her wrist. Hard, deliberate, a show of dominance. Something inside her shifted. That dormant instinct she'd caged for years snapped awake. Her vision narrowed, every detail sharp, the angle of his grip, the pressure point at his thumb, the artery just beneath his wrist. "I suggest you let go," she said softly, her voice dropping into the tone that once made men freeze in deserts half a world away. He smirked, "Or what, sweetheart?" He never saw it coming. In one motion, she shattered a shot glass on the bar and held its jagged edge a breath away from his artery. Her eyes, steady and cold, locked on his. "Or we find out how fast you bleed." The room froze. For 3 heartbeats, silence held. Then Carter slowly released her, hands rising in mock surrender. "Just having some fun," he said, but the threat in his smile was unmistakable. He gathered his beers and backed away, leaving a 20 on the counter. "Keep it. Shame if something happened to this place. Lot of old wood, fire hazard." They retreated to a corner, muttering low, casting glances at her with wary eyes. The bar's noise crept back, but thinner, brittle. Alexis wiped down the counter, masking the tremor in her hands. She had slipped, shown too much. Bartenders didn't move like that. Bartenders didn't stare danger in the eye without blinking. "Quite a show," a voice murmured. She turned. A man from the corner booth now sat at the bar, mid-40s, fit, careful eyes that tracked everything. His posture casual but military threaded through every line of him. "Just doing my job," Alexis said. "We don't tolerate harassment here." He smiled faintly. "Is that what they're calling Krav Maga in bartending school these days?" Her stomach dropped. She masked it with a shrug. "What can I get you?" "Bourbon neat." She poured it, feeling his gaze heavy on her. Not curious, not predatory, recognizing. "Unit 9, wasn't it?" he asked softly. "Chimera program, hybrid techniques. That glass work was improvised, though. Nice touch." Her hands stilled. The name Chimera hadn't been spoken to her in 5 years. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice low, dangerous again. He set his glass down with care. "Dylan Westbrook. Nathan Cole was my brother." The glass in her hand slipped, shattering on the floor. For a second she couldn't breathe. Nathan's face swam before her, the grin, the leadership, the last order he'd ever given her. "Run." "That's not possible," she whispered. "It's true, he never mentioned me. We weren't speaking when he deployed. But I've been looking for you, Sergeant Morgan." The title hit harder than the memory. She hadn't been called sergeant in half a decade. Not since they'd erased her service, scrubbed her record, buried her unit's sacrifice in classified silence. Before she could respond, glass broke across the room. Carter was on his feet, face red, bottle shards dripping from his hand. "This isn't over," he shouted at her, "not by a long shot." They stormed out, slamming the door. Patrons gathered their coats, unsettled. The night's peace was broken. Dylan didn't move. "They'll be back," he said quietly, "and when they return, they won't come alone." Alexis stood frozen for a moment, glass still at her feet, Nathan's dog tag burning in her pocket. She had spent years running from her past, burying it under whiskey and silence. Now it was here, in the eyes of a stranger who knew too much, in the shadow of a biker gang that mistook her for prey, in the name of a brother she had failed to save. The war she thought she'd left behind had just found her. Why didn't she run? The thought echoed in Alexis's mind as she locked Whiskey River after midnight, the quiet streets swallowing the sound of the deadbolt. Edwin had gone home early, joints aching, and she had promised to close up. Alone now, the town seemed too still, too dark. She tugged her jacket tighter and started toward her apartment 3 blocks away. Her boots scuffed the pavement, the air crisp, the only light from faded street lamps. Granite Falls slept, perfect conditions for an ambush. She felt it before she heard it, that prickling at the back of her neck, the shift in the night's silence. Then came the low growl of motorcycle engines idling around the corner. Voices, men trying to be quiet but failing. She didn't change pace. Soldiers learned long ago not to show the enemy they'd been spotted. But her mind mapped exits instantly. The alley by the bakery, the fire escape across the street, the construction site 2 blocks over. She could vanish, but predators chased those who ran. "Hey, bar bitch," Carter's voice carried out of the shadows ahead. Alexis stopped, calm, measured. Carter emerged, flanked by 4 others this time. 2 from earlier plus 2 new faces, hard eyes glinting in the lamplight. They spread wide, forming a crescent around her. She saw the outline of brass knuckles, the gleam of a blade. "That wasn't very hospitable earlier," Carter drawled, pulling on leather gloves. "Thought we'd have a word about customer service." "It's been a long night," she replied, voice steady. "Go home, forget it happened." They laughed, a thin, ugly sound. One man twirled a knife between his fingers. Another cracked his knuckles with exaggerated menace. "Girls like you need lessons," the lanky one sneered. Her gaze swept over them, calculating. 5 men, 1 knife, 1 set of brass knuckles, open street, limited cover, odds poor but not impossible. She had survived worse. "Last chance," she warned, her tone low, the register that should have told them something was wrong. "Walk away." They didn't notice. They never did. The first lunged, reaching for her arm. Alexis pivoted, using his momentum to drive her elbow into his solar plexus. He folded, choking for air. She caught his wrist, twisted, and slammed him face first onto the hood of a parked car. Metal dented, glass cracked. The second hesitated just long enough for her boot to connect with his knee. A sickening pop. He screamed, collapsing. Carter snarled, charging with the knife. His first 2 slashes missed by inches. She barely moved, conserving energy, studying his rhythm. On the third, she stepped inside his guard, trapping his wrist against her body. A sharp strike to his elbow sent shock up his arm. The knife clattered to the pavement. She followed with a palm strike to his throat, another to his chest. He went down gagging, gasping for breath. The fourth landed a glancing punch to her ribs before she spun, sweeping his legs from under him, driving him to the ground with a strike at the base of his skull. The fifth froze. Fear cracked through his bravado. He turned, sprinted to his bike, and roared into the night, fleeing the carnage. 30 seconds. That's all it took. 4 men groaning on the pavement, 1 gone. Alexis crouched, retrieved Carter's knife, and tossed it into a storm drain. Her breathing was steady, but inside her chest her heart thudded with the sharp rush of combat she had prayed never to feel again. She leaned down, her voice quiet, controlled. "Tell your friends this was me being restrained." Then she walked away, leaving them broken in the street, her hands steady but her soul trembling. Inside her apartment, she locked every bolt, checked every window, swept every corner with soldier's precision. She sat on the edge of her bed, dog tag pressed to her palm. "I'm sorry, Nate," she whispered. "I tried to leave it all behind." Sleep wouldn't come. Not after blood and violence stirred the nightmares. She lay back, eyes closed, breath controlled, but the dream dragged her under anyway. Dust, heat, the mountains of Afghanistan. She was in the Humvee again, Nathan beside her, scanning ridgelines. "Too exposed," she had said. "I don't like this." "Neither do I," Nathan answered, his voice taut, eyes never still. But intel says HVT passes through in an hour. We need eyes on. Something had felt wrong. Too clean, too convenient. She had asked to send scouts ahead. Nathan agreed. She reached for the radio. A flash, the world exploded. The Humvee flipped, rolled, screams, gunfire. Upside down, blood in her mouth, she had seen her team, Martinez, Jackson, Tor's broken bodies scattered on the road. Nathan barely conscious, ordering her to drag Martinez to cover. Go, he'd shouted, I'll hold them. She had known he wouldn't follow, known he meant to die there, grenade in hand. And she had obeyed, dragging Martinez across open ground under a hail of bullets. The last thing she saw before the helicopter came was the fireball that consumed the Humvee. Nathan inside, her captain, her brother in arms. The smoke rising like an accusation against the sky. Why you, Alexis? Why not us? She woke with a start, sheets damp with sweat, hand reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. The silence of granite falls pressed around her, but she knew better. She wasn't safe anymore. Not after tonight. Morning came gray and unforgiving. She pulled on jeans, a button-down, slipped a folding knife into her boot, pepper spray into her pocket. Small precautions. When she entered Whiskey River, Edwin was already waiting, worry carved into his features. They came this morning, he said quietly. Asked about you, wanted to know where you live. I told them they had the wrong person. She nodded, gratitude unspoken. They didn't believe me, said they'd be back. She sipped the coffee he poured, letting the silence sit heavy between them. For 4 years he had offered her peace, no questions, no judgment, and she had brought danger to his door. What happened last night? He asked finally. 3 of them cornered me, she admitted. I handled it. His eyes widened. God, Alexis. I'm fine, they're not. Understanding dawned slowly, his face paling. You took on 3 iron wolves. She only sipped her coffee again. They'll be back with more. Before Edwin could respond, the back door opened. A young woman rushed in, curly hair escaping its tie, sweatshirt creased from travel. Emily, Edwin's daughter. Dad, why didn't you tell me? She demanded, hugging him tight. I heard from the gas station. They threatened you. It's nothing, Edwin said, but his voice lacked conviction. Emily turned to Alexis. And you're the one they're talking about, aren't you? You stood up to them. Alexis offered only a tired smile. But before she could answer, the bar door banged open. 5 men entered, their vests marked with the Iron Wolves emblem. At their head, a man older, salt and pepper hair cropped short, eyes sharp as blades. No insignia. Only a silver wolf's head ring glinting on his hand. His presence pressed against the room like a storm. Edwin Reed. His voice was soft, almost polite. Edwin straightened, moving to shield his daughter. The bars closed until 11. I'm not here for a drink. The man smiled, a predator's smile. Vincent Harding, I own the Iron Wolves. He stepped closer, eyes sliding to Alexis. Seems we have business to discuss. The air shifted. Alexis's pulse steadied, her body already coiled. Harding wasn't here for bourbon. He was here for blood. What was the point of hiding now? The question pressed into Alexis as Harding's gaze fixed on her, unblinking, sharp enough to slice through every layer she had built. The Iron Wolves' leader didn't posture like Carter. He didn't need to. Power radiated in the way he stood, the calm way his men mirrored his movements. She said nothing, hands steady on the bar. Silence was a shield, and she had learned long ago that sometimes the strongest weapon was not answering. But Harding smiled as though her restraint confirmed everything he suspected. I've heard whispers about a woman in Granite Falls, he said slowly. Not just a bartender, a ghost, a soldier who vanished. His eyes narrowed. Last night you sent 3 of mine crawling home like dogs, and yet here you are pouring whiskey as if you belong among these quiet people. Emily bristled. Leave her alone, she's done nothing to you. Harding's gaze flicked to Emily, dismissive, then back to Alexis. On the contrary, she's cost me blood, and blood has value. Alexis poured him a drink without asking, sliding it across the counter. On the house, she said evenly. He studied her, then lifted the glass. You think generosity buys mercy? No, she said softly. I think it buys time. A ripple of laughter passed through his men, but Harding didn't laugh. He sipped, then set the glass down carefully, the ice clinking like a countdown. You remind me of someone, he said. I met a woman in Kandahar years ago, American like you, hard eyes, quicker hands. She left bodies in alleys and never looked back. Her breath caught, but she gave no sign. She had never spoken of Kandahar. He leaned closer. Tell me, Sergeant, how many names haunt you when you close your eyes? Her chest tightened. He knew. Somehow he knew enough to reach where it hurt. The old reflex rose in her: strike, silence him, end the threat. But the bar was full of innocents. Edwin, Emily, townsfolk who had never seen the kind of violence Harding carried in his wake. So she said nothing. Harding smiled again, faint, predatory. Your silence tells me more than your words ever could. He rose, slipping on his gloves. I'll give you one chance. Work for me, train my men, teach them what you know. In return, Granite Falls sleeps peacefully. Refuse, he let the pause hang heavy. And this town becomes another battlefield. He walked out without waiting for her answer, his men following. The bar exhaled in their absence, conversation stumbling back to life. But Alexis couldn't move. Her hands shook now, hidden beneath the counter. Work for them, train killers. The thought ignited something in her chest: rage, disgust, fear. Dylan's voice came low from the corner. He won't stop. She turned to him, eyes blazing. And what do you suggest? That I pick up where I left off? That I become their weapon? No, he said, leaning forward. I suggest you remember why you fought in the first place. The words struck deeper than she wanted to admit. She fought to protect, to shield, to stand in the gap when no one else could, but she had failed once. Could she bear to fail again? That night she walked the quiet streets long after closing, the weight of Harding's ultimatum pressing her lungs tight. Dylan followed at a distance, not intruding but present. She finally stopped at the war memorial, its stone surface etched with names from 3 wars. Granite Falls had given its sons, like every town. Her fingers traced the cool letters. She whispered names from her own unit, names that would never be carved here. Martinez, Torres, Jackson, and Nathan Cole, always Nathan. You still carry them, Dylan said softly behind her. Every day, she admitted, voice breaking. Every breath. Then don't let their memory rot in a bar while wolves tear through this place. She turned, anger sparking. You don't know what it cost me. You don't know what I did to survive. He met her eyes calmly. Then tell me. The words lodged in her throat. For 5 years she had locked them away. But under the weight of Harding's shadow, silence felt like cowardice. She sank onto the memorial steps, head in her hands. The night air smelled of pine and smoke. Her voice shook when she began. Coringal Valley. We were tracking an HVT through the mountains. Intel said ambush risk was minimal. It was. They were waiting for us. RPGs, machine guns. We didn't stand a chance. Images flashed unbidden. Fire, screams. Nathan's final order. I ran, she whispered. He told me to, and I did. I dragged Martinez, but the others, they didn't make it. And Nathan, her voice cracked. Nathan burned while I hid in the rocks. That's who I am, Dylan. A coward who lived when better men didn't. He crouched beside her. No, you're the one who kept his order. You saved Martinez. You carried what no one else could. Don't twist survival into shame. His words hit like a blow, but also like balm. Silence stretched, the night heavy with memory. Finally, she whispered, what do we do about Harding? He asked. You wanted me to remember why I fought. Fine, but I won't do it alone. Dylan nodded slowly. Then we start with the town. People need to know what they're facing. and you need to decide if you're ready to be seen for who you are." Her chest tightened again. Being seen meant questions, judgments, eyes that might never understand, but what choice did she have? The iron wolves weren't going away, and Harding wasn't the kind of man to give second chances. Morning broke harsh and clear. By noon, Alexis stood before a small gathering in Whiskey River's back room. Edwin, Emily, Dylan, and 3 locals who had fought in Iraq years earlier. Men with tired eyes but steady hands. She looked at them and felt her throat close. She had led squads into firefights, but never like this. Never civilians, never people who thought their wars were long behind them. "They're coming," she said simply, "and they won't stop until they own this town or bury it. Harding gave me an offer I refused." Edwin nodded grimly. "Then they'll burn us out." "They'll try," Alexis said, her voice strengthened as she continued. "But we're not defenseless. We know these streets, we know each other, and I know how they think." Dylan watched her with quiet approval. Emily leaned forward, fire in her eyes. "So what's the plan?" Alexis took a breath. "We prepare, we fortify, we make Granite Falls a place they regret touching." But even as she spoke, a gnawing thought twisted inside her. Was she leading them to safety, or into a new valley of ghosts? Why did they trust her so easily? The question circled Alexis's mind as she stood in the dusty lot behind Whiskey River, watching a handful of townsfolk fumble with rifles they hadn't touched in years. The afternoon sun beat down, hot against the asphalt, sweat running down their brows. Dylan barked small corrections, his voice steady, but the awkwardness was obvious. Granite Falls was a town of carpenters, ranchers, and teachers, not soldiers. And yet here they were, looking to her for answers, for leadership she wasn't sure she had left in her. "Feet apart," she called, stepping forward, her voice cutting across the lot. "Don't wrestle the rifle, let it breathe with you." One of the men, Mark, a high school history teacher, adjusted his stance, grimacing at the weight. She guided his shoulders, adjusted his grip, until his body aligned with the weapon instead of fighting against it. He glanced at her nervously, "Like this." She nodded. "Better, now breathe, squeeze." Why did fear spread faster than truth? The question haunted Alexis as dawn broke over Granite Falls. The streets looked the same, brick storefronts, faded signs, the diners' neon buzzing weakly, but something in the air had shifted. Harding's visit had poisoned it. People spoke in hushed voices now. Every truck that slowed on Main Street drew nervous eyes. Every motorcycle in the distance made stomachs tighten. By noon, rumors were already twisting. Some said Harding had an army of 50 men riding in from Denver. Others whispered about weapons caches hidden in the hills or corrupt deputies on his payroll. Fear fed on itself, swelling until even sunlight seemed powerless to thin it. Inside Whiskey River, Alexis leaned against the counter, watching. Locals huddled over coffee, their words sharp and heavy. Some wanted to fight. Others spoke of leaving before the wolves returned. "What if they torch the whole block?" one man asked, voice shaking. "We've got kids, families, we can't stand against that." "They'll bleed us dry," another muttered. "Protection money or ruin, same story everywhere." Edwin tried to calm them, but his voice carried no weight against dread. Finally, Alexis stepped forward. "If you leave, you'll only give them more. They won't stop with Granite Falls. Wolves don't leave prey behind." Her words silenced the room, but the fear didn't vanish. She saw it in their eyes, the same fear she once carried on patrols, when every ridge line could hide a rifle. She swallowed hard. "I can't promise safety, but I can promise this. If we stand together, they'll think twice before making this town their graveyard." It wasn't a rallying cry, it was truth, and truth hurt. That evening, Dylan found her outside, sitting on the back steps, smoking a cigarette she hadn't touched in years. Smoke curled upward, thin against the twilight sky. "You're losing them," he said quietly. She didn't look at him. "I know. They don't believe they can win." Her laugh was bitter. Neither do I. Silence stretched. Dylan sat beside her, the boards creaking. When Nathan and I were kids, he dragged me up this mountain near our house. Every time I swore I couldn't make it. Every time he pushed me until I did. He never stopped believing in me, even when I gave up on myself. That's who he was. She flicked ash onto the step, and I let him die. No, Dylan's voice was steady, sharp. You lived because he chose you to. Don't waste that choice. Her throat tightened. The cigarette trembled between her fingers. I don't know if I can carry them all again. You don't have to carry them, Dylan said softly. Just lead. She closed her eyes. The ghosts pressed close, but for the first time she felt them not as chains but as witnesses, waiting to see if she'd rise. 2 nights later, Harding made good on his threat. It began with fire. A storage shed near the edge of town erupted in flames at midnight. By the time the volunteer firefighters doused it, nothing remained but twisted metal and ash. Spray painted across the wreckage was a wolf's head. The next day, 3 businesses received letters tucked under their doors. Paper, ink, simple words, pay or burn. Granite Falls trembled. Some shopkeepers quietly packed their belongings. Others debated calling the county sheriff, though no one trusted outside help would come in time. Harding thrived in that uncertainty. In Whiskey River, Alexis spread the letters across the bar. Dylan, Edwin, Emily, and the small circle of willing fighters stood around her. They're testing us, Alexis said, seeing if fear alone will break us. It's working, Edwin admitted. His voice cracked. Half the town's ready to hand over whatever they've got. Emily slammed her fist onto the bar. And live like slaves? No, not here. Dylan's eyes met Alexis's. This is the moment. You either step forward or Harding wins without firing a shot. She stared at the letters, her reflection faint in the glass bottles behind the bar. Step forward. Every part of her screamed against it. She wasn't a leader anymore. She wasn't whole. But the town didn't need whole. It needed someone willing to stand when everyone else bent. Finally, she nodded. Then we show them fear doesn't own us. Training shifted into something harder, more disciplined. Alexis drilled them in the parking lot behind the church, in the abandoned mill, even in the empty school gym after hours. Simple maneuvers, cover and movement, how to use terrain. The first time she barked "move," the echoes dragged her back to Afghanistan. Sand, bullets, Martinez's steady breath in her ear. Her chest tightened until she almost faltered. But then Emily stumbled, rifle slipping from her hands. Alexis caught it, steadied her, and saw the fear in the young woman's eyes. Not battlefield fear, fear of failing her father. Alexis softened her tone. Again, you'll get it. Emily nodded, determination flickering through the fear. Alexis recognized it. Saw herself at 19, desperate to prove she could stand in a world that never believed she could. By the third drill, Emily moved sharper, quicker. The others followed suit. Awkwardness gave way to something resembling resolve. That night, Alexis sat in her apartment, muscles sore, mind restless. She opened her journal for the first time in years, pages yellowed with dust. She wrote the names again. Martinez, Torres, Jackson, Nathan. And beneath them she added a new line, Granite Falls. Not a mission, not an order, a promise. Harding didn't strike immediately. That was his game: pressure, dread, erosion. A week passed with no attacks, only the constant prowl of wolves circling town on their bikes, revving engines at night, breaking windows with thrown bottles. Sleep became scarce. Parents kept children indoors. Businesses locked up early. One evening, Alexis found Emily crying in the stockroom, her hands shaking as she tried to stack glasses. "I can't do this," Emily whispered. "I thought I was strong, but every time they ride past, I feel like I'm going to break." Alexis knelt, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Fear doesn't mean you're weak, it means you're alive. Strong is standing anyway." Emily wiped her eyes, staring at her. "How do you do it?" Alexis hesitated. Then for once she answered honestly. I don't. Not always. Some nights I can't breathe. Some nights I dream of fire and I wake up choking on smoke that isn't there. But I stand because others can't. Because if I fall, who carries them? Emily swallowed hard, nodding. For the first time, Alexis felt a strange warmth. Not pride exactly, something quieter, the fragile beginning of hope. But hope was fragile. 3 days later, Granite Falls woke to sirens. The wolves had struck again, this time the diner, burned in the night. Flames gutted it, leaving only charred beams and the smell of loss hanging heavy in the morning air. Locals gathered in shock, children cried, the town's heart was ash. Harding's message was clear, nothing was sacred. As Alexis stood amid the crowd, Dylan's voice came low at her side. He's forcing your hand. Next strike it won't be buildings, it'll be people. She stared at the smoke, the ashes swirling into the cold sky. The town looked to her, eyes pleading, afraid, desperate. And for the first time, Alexis didn't shrink from it. Her voice was steady when she spoke. Then we stop waiting, we take the fight to them. Why did it feel like déjà vu? The question clawed at Alexis as she studied the crude map spread across the bar's back table. A hand-drawn outline of Granite Falls, streets marked with red excess, circles over weak points, alleys, fuel tanks, the volunteer fire station. Dylan leaned over her shoulder, pointing with a pencil. They'll use intimidation again before striking hard, probably another fire. They want you to crack before you're ready. She nodded, though her throat tightened. It was the same playbook she had seen before, in Helmand, in Kandahar, when insurgents bled villages with fear until no one resisted. The battlefield had changed, but the strategy was the same. Then we flipped the script, she said, her voice quiet but sharp. We hit first. Dylan raised a brow. You're ready for that? She didn't answer right away. Her eyes rested on the dog tag lying beside the map. Nathan's name, a reminder, a wound, a promise. Yes, she whispered. By evening the plan was set. Small teams, quick strikes, minimal risk. They couldn't match the wolves' numbers, but they could use surprise, terrain, and the one thing Harding underestimated, Alexis's training. The first target was an old quarry on the edge of town. Locals had spotted bikes stored there, gas cans stacked high. Harding's supply hub. The team moved under moonlight, Dylan, Emily, and 3 volunteers. Nerves crackled in the air, but Alexis's calm steadied them. She spoke in low tones, assigning roles, reminding them of silence, cover, exits. When they reached the quarry, the smell of gasoline stung the air. Rows of bikes gleamed in the pale light, unattended. Too easy, Dylan muttered. She agreed. Her instincts screamed trap. Still, opportunity was rare. She signaled Emily forward with the fuel-soaked rags they'd prepared. Emily hesitated, breath shaking. Alexis knelt, gripping her wrist. Breathe slow, you can do this. Emily nodded, steadied herself, and set the first rag beneath a bike. One by one, they planted them. Alexis lit the final match, flame flickering against her eyes. For a heartbeat, she saw the Humvee again, fire consuming Nathan, her unit, everything she'd loved. Her hand shook. Dylan's voice broke the spell. Alexis. She dropped the match. The night erupted. Flames climbed, bikes toppled, explosions rippled across the quarry. The wolves' supply hub turned into an inferno. Cheers broke from the volunteers, relief and triumph cutting through fear. But Alexis didn't cheer. She watched the fire with hollow eyes, smoke curling like ghosts. Message sent, Dylan said. Yeah, she murmured, but they'll answer. They did. 2 nights later, Harding struck back. Not with fire this time, with bodies. Alexis was closing the bar when the door slammed open. Sheriff Clayton stumbled in, blood seeping through his shirt, his face pale. Behind him, 2 deputies carried a third, dead, throat cut. They ambushed us, Clayton gasped. Roadblock on Highway 12, we never saw them coming. Alexis helped him to a chair, pressing cloth against the wound. Rage simmered in her chest. Harding wasn't just burning buildings anymore. He was hunting men. Emily's voice shook. What do we do? Alexis looked around, at Edwin's lined face, at Emily's trembling hands, at Dylan's steady gaze. The town was breaking, caught between terror and hope. Her voice came low, firm. We finish this. The next days blurred into preparation. Barricades went up on side streets. Locals stockpiled food, water, ammunition. Alexis drilled them harder, teaching hand signals, fallback positions, how to treat wounds. At night she walked the quiet streets alone, listening to the wolves' howls echoing in her head. Not Harding's men. The real wolves in the mountains, wild and merciless. Predators by nature. She wondered if she was any different now. One evening Dylan joined her. They walked in silence until he finally asked, "What happens when this ends, if we win?" She shook her head. "I don't think about after." "You should," he said gently. "Because living isn't just surviving. You taught Emily that. You need to teach yourself." Her chest ached. "I don't know how." "Then start small," he said. "Start with tomorrow." Tomorrow came faster than she expected. Just before dawn, scouts reported a convoy heading toward Granite Falls, Harding's full force. Dozens of bikes, 2 trucks loaded with men, more than the town could face head-on. Alexis gathered everyone in the church basement, the smell of dust and candle wax heavy in the air. Faces pale, eyes wide, but no one turned away. She stood before them, heart hammering, ghosts pressing close. "They're coming, today. Harding thinks he can break us. He's wrong. We know this ground. We've trained. We stand together or we fall alone." She paused, scanning the room. Every face mattered. Every soul was weight on her shoulders. Her voice softened. "I won't lie to you. Some of us may not walk away, but if we run, we'll never stop running. If we stand, we give our children more than survival. We give them dignity." Silence followed, thick and heavy. Then Edwin rose, shotgun in hand. "I've been pouring drinks in this town 40 years. If this is how I go, so be it. But I won't bow." Emily stepped beside him. "Neither will I." One by one the others followed. Not soldiers, not warriors, just people refusing to bend. Alexis felt the weight of it, crushing and lifting her all at once. For the first time since Coringal Valley, she wasn't fighting alone. As they dispersed to their positions, Dylan lingered. "When it starts, stay close to me." She shook her head. "When it starts, stay close to them. They need someone if I fall." "You're not falling," he said firmly. She touched Nathan's dog tag, the metal cool against her skin. "I already did. This time I stand." Outside, the first distant roar of engines carried on the wind. Wolves were coming, and Alexis Morgan, once a ghost, was ready to be seen. Why did the engines sound like thunder? The ground itself seemed to tremble as the wolves rolled into Granite Falls. Dozens of motorcycles roared down Main Street, headlights piercing the dawn. Behind them, 2 pickup trucks growled, men standing in the beds with rifles raised. The townsfolk who hadn't fled barricaded themselves indoors, curtains drawn, prayers whispered. From her position atop the hardware store roof, Alexis watched through binoculars, every move, every formation. She felt her breath steady, her pulse settle, the calm before impact. Dylan crouched beside her, rifle across his knees. "That's more than 30, maybe 40. Her jaw clenched. "Numbers don't matter, position does." She signaled to Emily, posted with 2 others near the church steps, and to Edwin, hidden behind sandbags by the bar. The people of Granite Falls were scattered through alleys, rooftops, and makeshift barricades, outnumbered, outgunned, but not unprepared. Harding's convoy slowed, parking diagonally across Main Street like they already owned it. Engines idled, a guttural chorus that rattled windows. Then Harding stepped forward, black jacket, silver wolf's head ring gleaming in the pale light. Calm, collected, He looked up, straight at Alexis, as though he knew exactly where she was. "Sergeant Morgan," his voice carried, strong and deliberate. "Bring yourself down here. Let's end this without your people bleeding for you." A hush fell over the town. Even the engine seemed quieter. Alexis didn't move. Her hands tightened on the binoculars. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. When silence stretched too long, Harding's smile faded. He lifted a hand. "Fine, we'll do it the old way." The first shot cracked the morning. Glass shattered. A woman screamed from inside the diner ruins. Chaos erupted. Alexis moved instantly, sliding into position behind the rooftop ledge. She sighted her rifle, exhaled, squeezed. The first wolf dropped, rifle clattering against the truck bed. Across the street, Emily and her group fired from behind barricades, scattering bikers diving for cover. Edwin's shotgun roared from the bar, its blast echoing. The wolves answered with a storm of bullets. Windows exploded, wood splintered, dust choked the air. Alexis shifted position, crawling along the rooftop, firing controlled bursts. She wasn't trying to win the battle with her rifle, only to hold the wolves' attention, to make them second-guess every step. Below, Dylan moved like a shadow, guiding townsfolk to fallback points, shouting orders over the din. He fought with precision, his training as sharp as hers. But still the wolves pressed hard. More poured from the trucks, spreading into alleys, flanking positions. The townsfolk faltered under the sheer weight of numbers. "Too many," Dylan shouted, ducking behind cover. Alexis's heart pounded. She saw Emily firing wildly, fear creeping into her stance. She saw Edwin reload with trembling hands. The people were brave, but bravery cracked under fire. And then she saw Harding. Calm, deliberate, walking through the chaos as if bullets were beneath him. His eyes never left her. She made her choice. Sliding down the back of the hardware store, she hit the ground running, weaving through alleys until she reached the center of the fight. Dust stung her eyes, the air thick with smoke and gunpowder. She burst from cover, rifle at the ready. "On me," she shouted, voice cutting through the storm. The townsfolk rallied at once. Emily steadied her fire, Edwin grit his teeth and reloaded faster. Others shifted to cover angles they had forgotten in panic. Alexis moved among them, not above them. Quick strikes, sharp commands, eyes scanning every line. She became the anchor they needed, the presence that steadied chaos. For a moment it worked. The wolves hesitated, thrown off by the sudden resistance, by the fire in a town they thought broken. But Harding wasn't finished. He whistled, a sharp, piercing sound, and from the trucks came more men, heavier armed. One hauled out a Molotov, flame licking at the rag. Alexis's blood ran cold. "Molotov, take him." 3 rifles cracked. The man fell, bottle shattering harmlessly on the pavement. Relief surged, but it was fleeting. Another stepped forward, grenade in hand. She fired fast, dropping him before he could pull the pin. The fight spiraled tighter, blood and smoke mixing. Townsfolk fell back toward the church, holding the line as best they could. But the wolves pressed harder, more ruthless with every step. And then Harding was there. He moved through the smoke, pistol raised, eyes fixed on her. Their gazes locked, predator to predator. He fired first. The bullet ripped past her shoulder, close enough to sting. She dove, rolled, came up firing. Their shots cracked the air, each narrowly missing, each closer than the last. They closed the distance fast. The gunfight broke into fists, elbows, knees. His strength was brutal, every blow a hammer. She met him with precision, each strike sharp and measured, her training clashing with his raw power. He slammed her against a wall, hand at her throat. "You should have joined me, Sergeant. You could have been more than this." Her vision narrowed, lungs burning. But even as darkness pressed at the edges, she remembered Nathan's voice. "Don't bow, don't break." With a final surge, she twisted, drove her knee into Harding's ribs and tore free. Her elbow smashed across his jaw. He staggered, teeth bared, blood at the corner of his mouth. They circled each other, the battle around them fading into a blur. "You're no savior," Harding snarled. "You're just another ghost." Her grip tightened on the pistol. Her voice came low, steady. "Ghosts don't kneel." She fired. The shot tore through his shoulder, spinning him to the ground. He roared in pain, clutching the wound, his men faltering at the sight of their leader bleeding. For the first time, the wolves looked uncertain. Alexis stood over him, chest heaving, blood on her face, smoke curling around her like a shroud. The townsfolk gathered behind her, rifles raised, fear hardening into something fiercer. Harding's eyes burned, but he smiled through the pain. "You think this ends with me? Wolves don't die with one man." Her gaze held his, unflinching. "Maybe not, but it ends here, with you." The engines roared again as the wolves scrambled, dragging their wounded, retreating under cover of smoke. One by one, bikes peeled away, trucks screeched back down Main Street. The fight wasn't clean. Granite Falls lay scarred, windows shattered, walls pocked with bullet holes. Blood stained the street, but the wolves were gone. Silence fell heavy, broken only by the crackle of smoke. Emily lowered her rifle slowly. Did we win?" Alexis stared at the empty road, her chest aching, the ghosts pressing close. "For now," she said softly, "for now." Why didn't victory feel like victory? The question clung to Alexis as dawn bled across Granite Falls, painting the smoke-scarred town in pale light. Main Street was quiet now, too quiet. Glass crunched under boots, the air thick with the stench of burned fuel and blood. The wolves were gone, their engines fading hours ago, but their shadow lingered. She walked the ruined street, rifle slung low, eyes scanning not for enemies but for survivors. Edwin sat on the church steps, his shotgun resting across his knees, exhaustion etched deep into his lined face. Emily leaned against him, eyes closed, head on his shoulder, too spent even to cry. Others emerged slowly from alleys and basements, faces drawn, bodies bruised, hands trembling. Some carried wounds bandaged hastily, others carried the weight of names already lost. Granite Falls had stood, but not without cost. Dylan approached from the edge of town, his shirt torn, blood streaking his temple. "They're gone, for now." She nodded, though the words rang hollow. Harding's men had retreated, but retreat wasn't the same as defeat. Wolves scattered when struck, but wolves regrouped. She knew that truth too well. Her gaze fell on the street where Harding had bled. A dark stain marked the spot, already drying. She wondered if he was out there now, swearing vengeance, or if he would vanish into the long road, pride shattered. It didn't matter. Either way, the ghosts would remain. By mid-morning, townsfolk gathered in Whiskey River, not to drink but to breathe, to remind themselves they were still alive. Alexis stood near the back, silent, listening as Edwin spoke halting words of gratitude, as Emily promised to help rebuild, as Dylan urged vigilance. When the room quieted, eyes turned to her. She hadn't asked for it, hadn't wanted it, but now every gaze waited for her voice. Her throat tightened. She looked down at Nathan's dog tag in her hand, the metal warm from her grip. For 5 years she had carried it as proof of failure. Now, staring into the weary faces of Granite Falls, she felt something shift. She drew a breath. "I don't have speeches," she said softly. "I can't tell you this is over, it's not. Wolves don't vanish overnight." The room was still, every breath held. "But I can tell you this, last night we stood. Not because we were soldiers, not because we were armed to the teeth, but because we refused to bow. That matters, more than guns, more than numbers, dignity matters." Her voice broke, but she didn't stop. "I failed once years ago. I let ghosts convince me I wasn't worthy of the life I still had. But standing here looking at all of you, I see something different. I see that survival isn't cowardice. It's courage when it means carrying others with you." Tears pricked her eyes, she let them fall. For once she didn't hide. "So if they come back, we'll stand again. And if we fall, we'll fall on our feet, not our knees, because granite falls isn't prey, not anymore. Silence lingered after her words, not empty, but full, of grief, of resolve, of something resembling hope. Days turned to weeks. The town rebuilt slowly, scars etched into brick and soul alike. The diner was gone, but neighbors cooked for one another. Broken windows stayed boarded, but laughter returned in fragments. At night, the wolves' engines no longer prowled, though no one slept without listening for them. Alexis returned to the bar, pouring drinks again, though her hands bore new calluses from training, from building barricades, from carrying the weight of others. She still woke with nightmares, still reached for weapons in her sleep. But now, when the ghosts pressed close, she whispered their names aloud, not as chains but as companions. Dylan stayed, helping with patrols, fixing roofs, mending fences. Sometimes he sat across from her in silence, the kind of silence that didn't demand filling. Other times he spoke of Nathan, not as a captain, but as a brother, as a boy climbing mountains with scraped knees and unshakable faith. Those stories stitched something back together in her, piece by fragile piece. Emily grew sharper, steadier. No longer just Edwin's daughter, but someone who had tasted fear and chosen to stand anyway. Alexis watched her with quiet pride, knowing the torch of resilience had passed into younger hands. One evening, long after closing, Alexis stepped outside. The mountains loomed dark against the fading sky, their peaks brushed with starlight. She held the dog tag one last time, the metal cool and familiar. "Nathan," she whispered, voice trembling, "I don't know if I did right, but I stood for them, for me. Maybe for you too." She closed her eyes, feeling the night breeze against her skin, carrying her words somewhere beyond. Then, with steady hands, she walked to the lake's edge, the same place where Dawn had once found her drowning in guilt. She opened her palm, let the tag slip from her fingers, and watched it vanish into the dark water. Not forgotten, never forgotten, but finally released. She stood there a long time, the night quiet, the stars endless. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was running from war, from guilt, from herself. She wasn't healed. She might never be, but she was here, standing. And sometimes she realized that was enough. Because dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.